Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? It's your man, Big B, Brien Hanley, along with Tim Fitzgerald. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Appreciate everybody being in here. Tim Fitzgerald, again, 2 days in a row, is gracing us with his appearance. Just so you guys know, this is probably going to be a regular occurrence during the off season here. The rest of the spring and the summer, me and Fitz work well together. I told him the show's not the same without his lovely face. So he's going to be around for, quite a few episodes here. So I hope you guys appreciate it. But first off, again, Fitz, how are you doing, my man?
I'm good. It's good to be here. A little bit slower time on my other part of my job front. So I love doing these topical shows with you because you and I can dig into things, and we often agree, but sometimes we disagree. So let's get after it.
Absolutely.
And I'll just start by the SEC sucks. There we go. Done.
Yeah, today, look, we're diving into this. We're talking to SEC hoops. It basically was the best conference in the country this year, but I think it was overblown. We're going to explain some of the reasons on why we think that it was, why it actually was, but also dive into the reasons why it was good. So we'll cover all of that. But before we do anything, remember to always like, follow, subscribe, continue to get in the comment section, and always hit the notification bell so you know exactly when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. So first things first, the SEC this year fits in hoops. Look, it was the best conference. You can't deny that it was the best conference. You can use whatever metric you're trying to use. If you come out of it saying that that the SEC was not the best conference, you're lying to yourself, because it was. We did the same thing with football. It was. But how much better is the sticking point? Because first of all, I think in football, it was a hell of a lot closer than it was maybe even in basketball. In football, I don't think the margin, the difference was that far at all. But we're talking hoops today. But in hoops, it was a little bit further than football, because we've got some things, Fitz, that you can measure that by. First off is the non-conference schedule. When you look at the SEC and what they did in their non-conference schedule, they won 88.9% of their basketball games. That's a lot, ladies and gentlemen. It is a lot. Now you break it down to, they were playing a bunch of cupcakes. Well, hold on. They were 59-19 against the other Power 4 conferences. And I say Power 4 because I'm leaving the SEC out of it. So technically there's Power 5. And yes, the Big East is absolutely a power conference when it comes to basketball. So they were 59-19. Fitz, I know we want to say that it may be a little bit overblown, but when you start digging into those numbers, those kinds of things are a little bit undeniable.
Yeah, well, the numbers are good. And I'll admit that during November and December, they had a great deal of success against other conferences. And I think there were four really good teams in the SEC. There's no doubt about it. Nobody else had four really good teams. So let's start with that. They did. They absolutely did. And I think they had a lot of quality wins. But what does that mean in March for selections? And I know by the process that builds up your resume and everything, but here's where my disconnect's going. And the Big 12 has benefited from this in the past. Didn't this year. Just because the tide has risen for those four teams. And let me list them off here. Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee. That was the top four in their final standings. But all of them won more than 30 or more games. Well, I take that back. Alabama did not, but they were flat out dominant at times. So those teams separated themselves over the course of the season from the rest of the SEC. Just because that tide rose, in this case, it does not mean the other ships got good with them. They simply benefited from the ability to live off of playing those teams and thus their power rankings rose with it. Again, that's something the Big 12 has actually benefited from. But I think the inclusion of 14 schools from the SEC was a grotesque overreach. I'm not upset about the top portion of the conference, just like football. I'm very disappointed that somehow, because Florida was good enough to win the national title, Oklahoma belonged in the tournament.
Correct.
And Texas belonged in the tournament after winning 6 out of 18 SEC games.
Yeah.
I'm okay with taking a team out of a really good conference with a losing record, but only winning a third? This is where the problem is. They went way overboard, and in reality, if they hadn't, the SEC would look a lot better. They put 2 teams in the Final Four. Awesome, impressive, but not as impressive when you're talking about 14 schools overall. That's 1 out of 7. That's exactly what the Big 12 did.
Right.
And I just think there's too much credit given to teams that share a conference with dominant teams and lose to them most of the time. And I think that's something they really need to look at in some of these rankings. But we know this. A team like Oklahoma beat Arizona early in the season. And I think the problem I have with it is they don't get credit for what Arizona was in November or December. They get credit for what Arizona was in March, which was a much better team. And that's not the team they beat.
Right.
That's kind of the problem with the power rankings over the course of a very long basketball season against a lot of teams. Football's different. It's all self-contained, and you've only got 12 games, maybe 13 to judge off of. But basketball's so long and drawn out, and each game doesn't mean as much. And yet the committee seems to draw up the rules as if every game does mean a lot when it's between 2 teams like that. I don't know if I did a good job articulating what I'm thinking, but I just think we gave the SEC way too much credit for depth of quality and not just focusing on the quality of the top.
Correct. Well, I think you did an excellent job, first off, and you're right. The thing about it is, and I love the analogy of Oklahoma got credit for beating Arizona, the Arizona team that everybody saw at the end of the year. And people will say, well, it's the same players. I go, but if you know even a lick about basketball, about college basketball and how it works, a team is not going to be the same at the beginning of the year as they were at the end of the year. You could flip that cycle. Was OU as good at the beginning of the year in November as what they were in March? Absolutely not. They weren't. Well, they played. I don't care who they played. They played in the NCAA tournament. They lost. And I think everybody, and we saw UConn play. It's not UConn wasn't some juggernaut out there this year. That wasn't the case.
Yep.
I go, and they got handled. And it is what it is. But there's no way in the world that you're going to convince me that Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Georgia, or Texas belonged in the tournament over West Virginia. I'm just not going to hear that. And you can say, if you put West Virginia in the tournament or in the SEC, what would their record be? I don't know. I don't know what it would be. I don't play hypothetical basketball, but I do know that those 4 schools aren't as good. They didn't deserve it. They just didn't deserve to be in.
I feel like I just went to church. I'm just going to soak it in. By the way, just for the record, I'm really freaking good at hypothetical basketball. Never miss a shot. Yeah, I get the difficulty of the committee. I understand it. You're in many ways comparing apples to oranges, and it's hard to come down to these decisions. But boy, they leaned into the SEC way too much.
Yeah,
14 is that's a ridiculous number, guys. There's no way. Basically, your entire conference is good.
Correct.
There's no way. That's not.
And again. And I get it, Fitz. Those numbers, those non-conference numbers are undeniable. You can't bat an eye at non-conference numbers and just say they don't mean anything, because they do. But they based everything on that and let that ride for the entire season. That's the thing that drives me insane. It's like none of those teams got worse. Like, well, hold on a second. We're watching them in real time not play well. Game after game after game after game. You're going to tell me that in November, because of what happened in November, that just has to take precedence over no matter what happened in December, January, February. It literally doesn't matter. I just don't buy that. That's my problem with all of this, Fitz, is that they let non-conference basketball games decide, and they let it for the SEC. Because I can tell you this. Now, I don't play like I said, hypothetical basketball, but I am a make sense type of person. Had that been the Big 12 that had the exact same record and had all the statistics, 89 or 88.9% win percentage in the non-conference, 59-9 against the other Power 4 conference. Do you really believe that they would have allowed 12 teams from the Big 12 to get in, or 14 teams to get in? Absolutely not. And they shouldn't have. But they did with the SEC. I mean, 6-12 Fitz. 6-12 in your conference, and you get in? Unbelievable.
I can't understand it. It's almost like they weigh a non-conference win much more important than a conference loss, or in this case, 12 of them.
Correct.
And that doesn't add up to me. And I also recognize this, Big B, something happened to college basketball this year. I think it's been brewing after, I don't know how many seasons we're into, 4 of the portal. The portal's getting more and more involved in unbalanced teams in this. I thought the 4 teams in the Final Four were all very deserving. There was no one, in hindsight, misseeded as a number 1 when they shouldn't have been.
Right.
I've watched a lot of basketball in my life, and I've also drank a lot of alcohol, so I don't remember a lot of the basketball. But I don't recall a Final Four with 4 teams that good in my life.
Yeah.
Those teams were all really good. I'm sitting here still thinking Duke was the best team in the nation, and they didn't get to the championship game because Houston found a way to beat them, and then Houston found a way to lose to Florida that barely got through. But it was almost Texas Tech taking them out. Florida was the decimator of the Big 12 this year. But I'm still not convinced they're the best team. They're the national champion. They were a really good team. Don't get me wrong, SEC fans. I still think Duke might have been. But that's how the game's played. That's why each game shouldn't count as much as it does in football in the regular season, because upsets happen. I cover Kansas State. And for 6 games this season, Kansas State wasn't just the best team in the Big 12, maybe the best team in the nation. They ran through Kansas, Arizona, who else? Iowa State and West Virginia. They were all ranked at the time. Was Kansas State good at season's end? No, it got stinky. No. So whatever they did in those games had no relevance on what they were as a team at season's end.
Correct.
And I think we're offering too much relevance early in the season. And I grant they have to have a way to compare conferences, and records need to do that. But also, I just think, and I'm going to say it, ESPN is given way too much control of college athletics. And here's why, Big B, and I'm sorry if I'm dominating here.
Nope.
Here's why. That committee isn't sitting around watching every game and flipping channels through, hey, let's see what CBS Sports is saying about this game. Let's see what who else is out there saying about this game. Fox is saying about this game. No, they're on ESPN. When they're watching highlights, they're watching ESPN. And what's ESPN promoting? Because it's a business. There used to be a sense of news gathering in this world in which you stayed independent, but now everyone's got their team, including this show. And we're doing it right now. The SEC is promoting their product, the rights of ESPN is promoting the SEC, which is their rights. And they're saying these teams are unbeatable. These teams are unbeatable. These teams are unbeatable. These teams are amazing. And the committee's sitting there like, we're giving ESPN way too much power to influence the process. Turn the channel when you're in those rooms, or turn them off when it comes to analysis. If you're going to sit there, watch the games, but don't listen to analysis. None. If I'm going to write about my love for Big B, I'm not going to read a bunch of other people's stories about how much they love Big B. And there's a lot of them out there. Because that will influence how I express my opinion. I literally do that. If I'm writing about the topic, I avoid reading other people's opinion. I focus on the facts so I can get my own opinion going, which isn't easy in this thing. But they are letting the ESPN opinion and analysis form their opinions way too much.
Yes, you're 100% correct, Fitz. They've allowed ESPN to seep in. It was in football, but they've allowed them to seep in basketball. Now, I went back and forth the other day with somebody online because, again, they go overboard and saying it's ruining college athletics. And I'm like, guys, come on, man. We all watch. People keep showing up to these games. If it's ruining it, then why do people keep watching? Why do people keep going? That's all I ever say. And nobody ever has an answer for that. I get it. It's not what we like. I totally understand that. But we got to get past the ruining part of it. But is it ruining? Is it getting in the way of actual reality? I think yes, because again, you can't look at me. For instance, even the ESPN with the ACC, with North Carolina being in the tournament. How the hell is North Carolina were they in the tournament? And I don't care that they won a play-in game. That doesn't matter because San Diego State didn't belong there either. Okay, so none of that matters to me. What matters is that a team like West Virginia got left out when, again, they were in the second best conference in the country, finished at 500, have good non-conference wins. All of that has to matter. And then, again, if you're going to give credit to these other schools, to the SEC schools for what they did in the non-conference, then you have to give credit to West Virginia too. Oh, by the way, did I mention North Carolina was 1-12 and 9 against Power 14? Like they didn't beat anybody. Like they literally didn't beat anybody. But
they're North Carolina. They're named North Carolina, and the perception is they get higher ratings, which might be beyond perception. It might be truth. But that's not what we're doing with the NCAA tournament. That's not what we're doing with the college football playoff. The people in that room should give no craps about TV ratings.
Well, it's not only that. People watch March Madness no matter what. You're going to tell me if North Carolina wasn't in the tournament, the ratings are down 15% because North Carolina wasn't in? Give me a break. Nobody, but people would bitch just like they did for West Virginia. People bitch for a day or two, and then they moved on. The same thing would have happened with North Carolina. People would have bitched for a day or two, and then they would have moved on. I did it. I bitched for a day or two about West Virginia because I thought it was terrible. And then I moved on because you know what? The tournament was still going to happen. They weren't going to stop the tournament because Brien Hanley was mad that West Virginia didn't get in.
They should. They should. And the problem, though, was
it didn't even slow down.
The West Virginia coach then moved on. That was it. That's what took it off the
exactly. West Virginia coach was like, well, thank you, but I'm out of here. Oh, and by the way, I made that deal in February, but that's neither here nor there. That's different conversation for a different day.
Show.
A different conversation for a different day. I apologize, West Virginia fans. I know that's still a sore subject. It should be, but we'll get into that at another time. Having said all of that, Fitz, just to kind of put a bow on this thing, look, I understand teams being battle-tested early, challenging yourself in the non-conference season early on and winning. And you should be rewarded for that. You absolutely. For instance, Georgia beat St. John's. So they're being rewarded for beating St. John's because St. John's turned out to be a really good basketball team. I totally understand that. But again, the flip side of that was you can't have this good non-conference schedule and stand on that. But then when the conference comes around, you stink. And then, but my conference was really good. Look what I did in the non-conference. That's not how this is supposed to work. You're supposed to be good no matter what. And if you aren't as good in conference, and not just not as good, when you're lousy in conference, they rewarded teams for being lousy. That's what I and a lot of people have a problem with. Even at 8-10, and I said Georgia and Vanderbilt didn't belong, which I don't believe they did, but at least they were 8-10. I can get past that. But you're going to tell me a 6-12 basketball team in conference belonged in the tournament? I'm not going to get past that. I'm not even going to bring that into the realm of conversation because you're full of it, and you're full of it. That's my thoughts, Fitz.
Yeah, I have really no problem with the team in the conference getting in the tournament when they're one game under 500 in their standings, which 8-10, you flip one game, you're 9-9.
Correct.
I have no problem with that. 6-12 is a bridge way too far.
Yes.
We could discuss 7-11 and I still wouldn't be happy, but 6-12, come on, what are we doing here? So competing in your own conference doesn't matter, but the non-conference does. Yeah, the committee went too far. They did it at the exclusion of some teams that belonged in. And, they stuffed the ballot box by sticking North Carolina in there for reasons I will never understand, Big D, other than the fact that they just gave in to the brand. A lot of these, they need to be doing fake resume or anonymous resumes on these teams. A lot of them, but they're not apparently, because there's no way anyone else that isn't named North Carolina, Duke, someone like that gets in with North Carolina's resume.
No.
West Virginia had a better resume and didn't get in, so that pretty much says it all.
Says it all. It's disappointing. But again, it's people are going to think, oh, you don't know basketball. You don't think the SEC was the best conference. At the very beginning of all of this, both of us clearly stated that the SEC had the best conference in basketball. You can't deny that. But how far it runs is something that you can deny. And if you're trying to tell me that 6-12 equals good, I'll never believe that. Ever, anytime, any place, Fitz.
I totally agree. And, the bigger picture here is, again, another topic for another show, is this inequity in income. The amount of money ESPN's paying the SEC is going to have this eroding effect on quality throughout college sports. We've already seen it in football. I'm going to be really blunt here. The SEC cheated their asses off for years. That was their advantage. This year, we're starting to see what the transfer portal and everyone being able to play players on the football side did. But eventually, and we're going to start seeing it this year, the SEC's NIL budget for football is so grotesquely more than almost every other conference. There's gonna be a price to pay, and it's going to get all out of whack. And I think because of that growing income, even though football gets a lion's share of it, the basketball share is greater too. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to see it in basketball, where because you're good in football, you get more money to help basketball. That's essentially what we're seeing with the SEC. Their advantage in football, because they've been good, led to a huge media contract that's now helping basketball, which was never the gig in the SEC.
Nope.
It's only going to get worse.
Never, ever, ever. But that's where we are. That's where it's going. It's unfortunate, but somebody's got to come to their senses. I don't know who that's going to be, but again, that's a conversation for another day. So appreciate you, Fitz. Thank you again for giving us your time today. Thank everybody for being out here. Again, remember to like, follow, subscribe, continue to get in the comments, hit the notification bell so you know when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. Until next time, we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.